Right, welcome back and thank you for staying with Business Today. Now, rural women are participating in rural climate assemblies in a forum for women to discuss key issues on climate change that leaders need to prioritize ahead of climate summit. Now, this comes after a realization that a lot of investments on climate change have not reached rural women. In rural assembly held in Tanglubei, Tayeti constituency of Baringo County, women said the effects of climate change have impacted them negatively, and especially the drought experienced in the region that has contributed not only to food insecurity but general insecurity that women have suffered the brunt.
Kwa hii community yetu kina mama ndio wanategemewa sana. So unapata sisi ndio tunategemewa kwa jamii, na wao climate change imeaffect kazi zetu ambao huwa tunafanya ili tuweze kujikimu.
Tungeomba Mr. President utupe pesa. Tufunge hii maji inaenda mpaka lake na haitumiki. Ifungwe hata kutoka upper zone, middle zone na lower zone. Watu wafanye agriculture ndio tuweze kujikimu kupata hata na chakula.
Tungeweza kuomba rais kwamba unapochea hiyo kiti ya hiyo mkutano ya wiki ujao utukumbuke kwa maneno ya maji ili tupate kufanya agroecology. Tumefunzwa maneno ya kupanda mboga, kupanda miti, lakini hatuna maji, hatuna mbegu, na pia mahali kwa access hizo mbegu ni mbali kwa sisi.
Tungeomba serikali sana apate kusaidia hata watu wakumbuke sisi kama tiati walemavu sana. Yani kutusaidia hata kutuma grant, pesa ya kujisaidia, yani kujimudu katika maisha, yani kujilisha naye, kujifanyia biashara kadogo, ndio usiwe msiko kwa jamii, msiko kwa familia.
All right, now with that story, we come to a conversation where we are talking about climate financing, and joining me is Jemima Gathumi, who is the head of programs Capital Markets FSD Africa. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kelvin.
All right, now let's get right into the conversation and look at climate change. Next week we are starting the Africa Climate Summit Week, and the main theme being driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the world. And when we talk about climate financing, first of all, what do we exactly mean?
Okay. Thanks, Kelvin. So first of all, it's very exciting to see so much interest in the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week next week. And I think it just highlights the importance of this agenda to the African continent. And Africans are contributing to the climate discussion to try and find solutions for the continent's challenges, which include financing the climate challenges that we are facing. I think what we just had a few minutes ago, you can see some of those effects that are happening in Kenya and in the continent generally. And so climate financing is about being able to find the financing that's needed to address those challenges. In Africa, about $3 trillion is needed to address the climate action as defined in the national plans of the respective African countries. And that represents about $277 billion annually that's needed. And that's what's needed to actually address climate change that costs the GDP of African economies 5 to 10% of its annual GDP. Mm-hmm. So the summit presents a great opportunity to actually accelerate progress on the much needed economic and social transformation that's needed for the African continent. And so the summit will be, I think, a good platform to try and find solutions financing solutions as well for those challenges.
All right.
Yeah.
Even from where you sit, when you look at financing solutions, what are some of the examples of the climate financing that we have or that can be looked into so that at least we find even some bit of solution to this?
Okay. So there's a range of financing solutions that can help to address the challenges. And I think it's important to look at it from a broader perspective, which is whether the financial sector is adequately prepared to respond to the financing challenge. And there are many failures in the financial system that prevent that from happening adequately beyond just financing instruments. So some of them have to do with the structure of the financial system, and whether we have adequate policies and regulations, whether we have adequate market infrastructure to support that, and whether that creates an adequate enabling environment for finance to flow. So then that's the instruments come in. So what kind of instruments then or solutions can address that challenge? So there's a range of capital market opportunities, for example. Capital markets present a great opportunity to raise finance for the continent's climate challenges just because of the fact that it's possible to raise long-term financing through capital markets. So we've had instruments like bonds, for example. So FSD Africa, the organization that I work for, is a specialist development agency that's involved in developing financial markets across the continent, and we exist to make finance work for Africa. And one of the key things that we've done is helping develop the bond markets. So we've been involved in supporting a lot of green bond transactions, gender bond transactions to raise finance. I could give a few examples in the course of our conversation, but so far through our transactions, about 15 issuances, bond issuances that we've supported, we've raised about 320 billion in pounds of climate financing. Yep.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Very well explained. Now, when we look at the rural areas and the awareness that needs to go there, in terms of climate financing, is it something that is being spread even to the rural areas? Because people in the rural areas, if you talk to them about climate financing, they will not actually even understand. Some of them wouldn't even understand what you're talking about. Now, just give us some examples of the things that are being done, especially even in the rural areas, to just make sure that at least we get the population in the rural areas to just understand what this is all about.
Yeah, actually, people in the rural areas may not call it climate financing, but they do understand the impacts that the climate change is having on them. Yes. So the farmer in the rural area understands that they're experiencing more drought patterns, and that is affecting their ability to farm and grow crops. And so they understand climate change. They can see that something is changing in the environment. And one of the things that as FST Africa we've done, we have a partnership with Rabobank, in which we're working with smallholder farmers to finance smallholder farmers to be able to transform their farming activity into sustainable agroforestry as well, and being able to do that through the sale of carbon removal units. So being able to leverage the opportunities that exist in carbon markets to be able to help farmers transform their farming activity for more sustainable farming practices. So that's a practical example of how that results in an actual financing benefit for the farmer.
Now, let's move to innovative climate smart technology. And what are some of the notable solutions that we can explore to achieve even a greater investment into this? Something that we can innovate to help even in climate, in just resuscitating the climate and making sure that at least the climate is back to where it is. Some innovations, because now everyone is moving to technology.
Yes.
So what are some of the innovations in technology that can be explored?
Okay, so I will talk about three key areas that I think are solutions for climate technology, climate smart technology. One of them is the governments, I think, can provide a lot of support. Governments and their partners can provide a lot of support for climate smart technology development. So whether it's in the form of grants or tax breaks or incentives that can be provided to companies to innovate products and solutions for climate smart technology. That is an example of something that can be done. But governments cannot do it alone, which is why there is a greater place for private sector participation as well in developing some of these technologies. So a lot of government, private sector partnerships in developing these solutions as well. And then on the financing side, there is also just a whole, as I mentioned earlier, a whole range of instruments that can be used. And some of them are instruments that are, that directly raise finance, like the green bonds, for example, that I mentioned. Some of them are instruments that help to address the risk barriers to investment in some of these climate smart technologies. So de-risking solutions, for example, credit enhancement mechanisms that support investments, guarantees, for example, that help to address some of the risks that exist in investment and therefore incentivize the innovation and development of these technologies. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that. And now let's look at the climate summit. It's starting on Monday. What can Kenyans expect, and what can Africa as a whole expect? Because this is a summit that will run for 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah. So when you look at this particular summit, what are we looking at in terms of climate? How are we going to improve? So what can we expect from this?
Yeah, so I'm excited actually about the summit because it's 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for the Africa Climate Summit, and then that is followed by the Africa Climate Week for the rest of the week. Yes. And so as an organization at FSD Africa, we are a firm supporter of this climate summit because it represents it presents a platform, an opportunity for us to demonstrate that Africa is ready for transactions, deals are happening in Africa, and that it is actually possible to do these transactions in Africa. And so what I expect to see from the summit is a lot of announcements on deals, investments, partnerships, collaborations. So I expect both from the private sector, from the public sector, investments related to do with instruments like debt, equity, debt for nature, swaps, carbon credits, those kind of instruments. FSD Africa is very involved in organizing the summit. We are hosting and participating in about 20 events at the summit, all of different kinds, talking about catalyzing climate investment, talking about financing cities across Africa, talking about de-risking solutions that can help address the investment risks. And as part of those, we will actually also be making a lot of announcements as well, both for capacity building initiatives, market building initiatives that help to transform the financial sector, but also transactions. So we are all about supporting innovative climate financing transactions, and we want to demonstrate that it is possible in Africa. Those deals are actually happening, and that Africa is a place to invest. Yeah.
All right, and even as the summit is about to start now, what are some of the partnerships that you have in terms of the delegates who are coming to the summit, the organizations, and even the stakeholders that are coming there? And are we seeing even the local mwananchi going to such a summit? And just give us a perspective on this, so that at least we can get to understand if anyone can even decide to, if you want to go to this to listen to some of the topics that are going to be discussed, you can just tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a closed door summit. It has been open to registration to everyone.
Yes.
I believe those 30,000 delegates that I mentioned represent a whole cross-section of people from Kenya and across the continent, across the world, including the common mwananchi, I think has been open to register for the summit. I expect that their interest will also be represented by their leaderships. There are a lot of African heads of states attending, a lot of African business leaders, government leaders attending this summit. I think we're expecting to see a lot of conversations that represent the interest of the common mwananchi as well. So one of the things we expect from the summit is this Nairobi declaration, which is going to be announced at the end of the summit, or declared at the end of the summit, which basically defines Africa's position on climate issues ahead of the global talks, like the COP28 UN summit that's taking place in November in Dubai. And that I think that document will affirm Africa's position, will affirm Africa's ability to contribute climate solutions and the financing behind it. And that, I think, is an important piece of the outcome of the climate summit, and I think of benefit to all of us, including the Mwananchi. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for giving us information on that summit, and I believe people need to attend this summit to get at least the latest when it comes to how you need to take care of the environment to improve climate. All right, now, even as we come to a conclusion of this conversation, the future of climate change, in terms of trying to cushion ourselves as citizens, because better part of towards the end of last year and the start of this year, we had drought which lasted for a very long time, and some areas are still experiencing dry seasons. So going forward, when you look at climate and the topic on climate change, what are we looking at in terms of, are we going to be seeing the same forums and then we maybe have nothing that comes from there? So what is the future when it comes to climate change?
No, it's a great question, Kelvin, because I think, as I've always said, a chattering bird builds no nest. So it's important that we follow up all our commitments that we make at this event and at the Climate Summit with real action. And I think that is what I think, the onus is on everyone involved, from the business community to the government to individuals like you and I, actually, to hold climate action as a real important priority in everything that we do, and put it center stage in our decision making. And as FSD Africa, as I said, we exist to make financial markets work for Africa's future. And that means that we want to create markets that serve the needs of the continent, address the climate challenges that we think will continue to exist. I think achieving climate goals, we are a long way from it. I think if the idea is that we must get to a net zero carbon position by 2050, a lot more needs to be done. So I think it's a concerted effort, so all of us. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for joining us on Business Today and giving us your insights. Climate change, and remember, the Africa Climate Summit is happening next week, the whole of the week, Monday to Wednesday, and then we'll have Thursday and Friday for Africa Climate Week. All right, so we've come to the end of Business Today. My name is Kelvin Nyakundi. We've been speaking with Jemima Gathumi, who is the head of programs at Capital Markets FSD Africa. Remember, Mbiu KTN is coming up next, so don't go too far.